in the UK how children starting school, about over 10% of students who are still wearing nappies, wearing diapers, who are not toilet trained, who have no muscle tone. Some kids who can't even sit on the floor because they have no muscle tone. They don't know how to organise their bodies. They can't catch balls. They can't do this.
Welcome to another episode of the Reflex Integration Through Play podcast. Today, we are honored to have a very special guest, Moira Dempsey. Moira is the founder of Rhythmic Movement Training International, RMTI. With decades of experience in education, movement therapy, and neurodevelopment, she has helped countless therapists, educators, and parents understand the profound impact of reflex integration in learning, behavior, and overall development. Moira is also a co-author of the well-known book, if you know it, The Movements That Heal, alongside Dr. Harold Bloomberg, providing a foundation for understanding how rhythmic movement supports brain function and development. In this conversation, we will explore her journey, the inspiration behind RMTI, and how rhythmic movements can support a child's natural development progression. And we'll also dive into the importance of play and therapy and practical ways to integrate reflex work into various settings. Thank you so much, Moira, for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I especially enjoyed our lunch conversation when you came to visit California.
Yeah.
And you shared your insight about your journey. I just would love you to just introduce yourself to our audience here, share more about your experience in the field of reflex integration, just how you started RMTI.
Oh, I was a teacher, but I found educational kinesiology or brain gym, but I found it for myself back, 35 years ago or something. And I started to use it for myself, and it was very profound. And then I started to do some classes, and I became a brain gym instructor, worked in educate for a long time. But I was seeing kids. I was living in Singapore at the time, and I had kids that would see me. And one time I saw this boy, and I'd seen him a few times, and he came in one day and he said, Moira, I've been thinking about it. And he says, I know what my problem is, because he was always in trouble. He said, when the teacher yells, I get disturbed, then I disturb others, and I can't help myself. And I went, okay. Now someone had sent me a piece of paper with a paragraph about the Moro reflex and the ATNR reflex. I had no idea really what they were, but when he said this, I remember the paragraph. So I did what I knew at the time, and the effects were quite profound for him. And so we worked with that very clear intention for him. He wanted something to change. And the next week when he came with his mother, he was so pleased because he had not been in trouble all week. He hadn't been in trouble at school. So this was a kid who was always being told to get out. His mother was always being called up to the school about his behaviour. The tuition centres that he would go to were always calling the mother in. And for a week, the mother hadn't been called in. He hadn't been kicked out of a class. He hadn't had to go to the principal. He hadn't had to go to the disciplinary person. And he was so happy. And I went, I wonder what it is about the Moro reflex, because I really didn't know in fact, I knew nothing about it at all. And so I went, and I knew there was an Educate conference coming up, and people were talking about reflexes. And so they fascinated me then, and they fascinate me now. So that's how it started. So back in the sometime in the late 1990s, and it grew from there. And then, of course, I met many people who do reflexes along the way. It was Harold Blomberg, and I was at a camp for children with special needs, and he was working there, and I could see these kids come out, and they always seem so happy to come out of their sessions. And I went, oh. And I was in Singapore, so I said, oh, come to Singapore and teach some classes. So he did. And then we worked together for a while, and Eventually, we made what's become the RMTI program, and there was the two branches really, and we look at this more educational drawing out model. We don't see them as reflexes as an illness or anything. We just see them as something that hasn't completed a program. So we see reflexes as a program that needs to be completed because it lays the foundation, and that program starts before birth, during and after birth. And so how much can we complete? And we try to look at this. Where along that journey is that not working so well? And that's why my second book, which was Beyond the C-Squirt, was more about the journey of this and more about the stories that people have and some of the changes that have taken place when we use this approach that we have, which is a lot more, it's not a stamped in procedure. Let's see where you are in this river, this journey that we have to take, and we can go along that way. So that's what we do. We do our best to do. So I'm back in Melbourne. I pretended to retire a number of times. I do. But it's fun, and it continues to be a journey because we start finding out more and more about reflexes and their profound impact on development. And there's many things going around at the moment about children who aren't ready for school. I was reading something yesterday that said in the UK how children are starting school, about over 10% of students who are still wearing nappies, wearing diapers, who are not toilet trained, who have no muscle tone. Some kids who can't even sit on the floor because they have no muscle tone. They don't know how to organise their bodies. They can't catch balls. They can't do this. And while you could continue to blame COVID for many things, but it's not about COVID. They call them the COVID children, but it's not. They're attached to screens, they're in equipment, they're not learning to organise their bodies, which is part of what the job of reflexes is to help us the body to know what it has to do. So it puts those patterns into the body for how we have to move. And there's babies and getting this as babies, and it's just having a severe impact, I think, not just in the UK, but in Australia and in the US. So you could blame many things, but for us, it looks at this foundational aspect of just not getting movement and not getting a sufficient movement and learning to organize the body for ourselves.
Yeah. So going back to when you started the program, the RMTI, and you said you started from a teacher, an educator background, how were you implementing these movement as an educator?
I wasn't really. I was working in Singapore at a tuition school. Okay. So I was no longer in the traditional educational setting. And so the kids would come for 2 hours a week to learn English from. Yeah. But so I really wasn't implementing it, but I would start to notice things. So I actually did brain gym and educate with kids in classes, and I would learn something and I'd go and say, oh, let's do this. And sometimes kids would say, oh, can we do that again? Or sometimes they look at you and go, oh, you're a bit nuts. So I started to learn things that would help calm classrooms down, but it was very small groups. But I was working in a place where my boss at the time would say, because it was a private tuition school, if these children who seemed to trouble, he would say, if you want them to stay, they have to see Moira. I stayed a step ahead, but I learned a lot, and so I wasn't implementing so much. I was attempting to start to pass it on to people, which I did with, first of all, educate, and then as I started to learn reflexes about that, and I guess I'm curious about it, so I would tell people. So I didn't really implement it in classrooms because I wasn't in that situation by then. I was going to do
you're
that.
doing it privately, like one-on-one.
I was seeing kids one-on-one, and the little classes, the tuition classes, the English language classes that I had, I would do that with some of the little things with kids, but you just got a little, oh, let's do this. You're starting to annoy me, so I'm getting annoyed, so I better do something in here. So I've never really done that, but I have taught many people who work in classrooms who've started, and attempt to implement it in classrooms. Some of these kids, it's really very difficult to do it in a classroom, to go back to that foundational level of being on the ground. If I've missed stuff where I've had to be on the ground, but there are people who successfully do that and then see the kids who need that extra one-on-one type of work that needs to happen. And teaching people to identify that and taking away that they're just bad, they're naughty, why can't they do it? Let's put them on drugs. They've got ADD or ADHD or whatever label we like to put on something to try and explain behaviour. But if we can look at that, the kids aren't deliberately naughty. They're just sitting there using the resources, the foundational resources they have to be able to function in the world as safely as they can.
So for our audience, the listeners who don't have a background or understanding of what RMTI method is, like reflex integration through play is more of using functional, developmental, natural progression and play-based movement, the natural movement, and we're incorporating that to work on the reflexes. With RMTI, can you explain a little bit?
Well,
So
we
they
try to
understand how it looks like.
All right, so think about, first of all, when a baby's first born, what is their movement like? It's not very rhythmical, it's not very smooth, it's quite disjointed. And that's because that's natural. This is what it is. They don't have good head control, they don't have muscle tone. But as they develop, if they've got the foundation to do it, movement become smoother and have some rhythm and have organization, and then you build upon it and things like that. So what rhythmic movement does is attempts to go back to these innate patterns and this innate sense of rhythm, and they're coming from this very uncoordinated place into this rhythmical, smooth place. So we attempt to teach the body to go from there to this other place. So some people, you can see, are very disorganized. So where on that journey are we? Because it's not, oh, here's the reflex, oh, it's gone. It has to come in and then do this and then say, now I don't have to do this. My lifelong patterns have come in, and the patterns are there for me to build upon as I move through life in there. So what rhythmic movement attempts to do, and it's called rhythmic movement training, not because it's a training program, but it's because we're attempting to train the body, train the system to have the smoothness and organization and rhythm of movement that we're meant to have in there. And sometimes it is a rhythmic movement. Sometimes you have to go way back into the earliest movements that are happening in utero, that, like these little movements. So sometimes where developmentally are we, or what can I cope with on a movement basis? Because we're doing it as a very intentional way. So it's not just, oh, we're doing it, we have an intention. And so for some children, when we first start, some adults, they can only tolerate even maybe a minute of movement at the beginning because their system is so immature, and their neurological system is so immature that they can't deal with anything more than a minute, as it has to get used to something very new in the system. So we try to work out where they are as opposed to where we think they should be.
And with rhythmic movement, I took the first course to understand more about
the online one.
Yes, because I found out I'm originally, what I know more about is the Mascadova method. That's where I learned my original.
I started a long time ago with that too, before it.
Yeah.
Before it was the Mascadova method. This is back in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You were telling me about it too. And then some of my students in RITP are actually told me about your work, and I went and took it to understand. So from my understanding from the first one is more of most of the work that you do is hands-on, right? So you do rocking and hands-on exercise. I'm just saying that so for the listeners, they understand there is hands-on work that goes with the rhythmic movement, and you're guiding the body when you're working with the clients.
And we're trying to work out what the body knows.
I see.
So because at some level, the body knows, because that's our first learning, is through the body.
Yeah.
And so, what the neurological maturity of the body is, what's the connection between the body and the brain, and what does it have there? And so, yes, it's a very hands-on, and using the hands as the best tools that we have to know what it is there. It's not necessarily an intellectual exercise.
Who do you feel, from working for decades now, the best clients to use the rhythmic movement? I do believe that there is no one treatment fits all, in my opinion, and I incorporate so much. Even in RITP, we're open to, hey, whatever works for this individual.
Whatever works. And I'm the same with you, whatever works.
That's why I love having you here, because
I,
come on,
I
let's talk about it.
I don't know if I certainly don't think that rhythmic movement has all the answers or everything. And sometimes I go to a class, say, oh, that's good. I think I'll introduce that. I'm going to use that. And I try to say where I learned it from and things like that. But I certainly don't know everything. And if everyone thinks that, can hit me across the head, because I really don't. But there's a place for rhythmic. I think one of the blessings of rhythmic movement is that you can use it by itself, or you can incorporate it with everything else that you know. So it's not this, if you use rhythmic movement, you can only use rhythmic movement. It's not that. It's a program that because it's looking at, what do I have? What do I have as a resource? And how do I go from there and give myself more resources? And at the very foundation, it's about, how do I learn to be safe in the world? Mm-hmm. Because so many of these people that we work with, and we work with adults too, don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe in their bodies. They cut themselves off from their bodies, or they're just overwhelmed. And you can see it in their bodies, how they're all over the place and things like that. But at the most foundational level of everything that we do is, how safe am I here? What's my safety? And some of us have a good development of that, and other people, nothing. So what they do is they just withdraw from the world, or they try and control their environment, because that's the only way they have of feeling safe. And because that's the first call on the nervous system for all of us everywhere, is this safe? Yeah. And the more maturity we have, the more neurological maturity we have, the greater I am is to assess what's going on and to be able to function in the world. And so many of these children that we work with, they don't know how to feel safe. They still want to cling, or they want to withdraw from the world. And, you have the school refusal kids, the ones who won't go to school because they don't feel safe there, and they don't know how to process the world in a way that allows them to do that. School's horrible, the teacher's horrible, everyone sucks, and so I'm not going to go. And the way that we all have of avoiding things when we don't feel safe. We all have language that does it. And my way or the highway, if you don't agree with me, then you're the worst person on the planet. Whatever. But that's what we do. And you see this in the world around us all the time. I haven't learned that basic thing about me being inside a we. We live in a world, we're mammals, where we have to live in a group. And you've got more and more people who don't know how to safely live inside that world. And it's like the outside world is taking them over. And so they're pushing back against it, because there's not that balance, that me with inside the we, and the we that's important for the me. So I have that balance about being able to safely live in the world around me. So do I have that or not?
That made me think about another question. Since you're doing touch and hands-on work with them, and if they are already feeling guarded, have you noticed with kids especially with kids who are very standoffish, or clients?
This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my hands here. Mm-hmm. You tell me when you're ready for me to do that. Because sometimes it's that first, they've done it because they've come, you haven't given them a warning. They need to know what's happening. And sometimes you can't, and sometimes you have to teach parents what to do, and sometimes you start with while they're asleep, and sometimes you say, I'm going to do this, can you follow me, because you can't touch them. And many of these kids, they're very touch sensitive. Yeah. But and so, there's a lot of ways in, and you just have to say, but number one is, like, I don't see many children now, but when I do, they'll come to my place because it's a bit messy and there's lots of things all over it. I don't have an office anymore, but they'll come in and they need to feel safe, so they'll wander around and they'll go into all the rooms, and I don't care what they go into, and because they need to know what their environment is. And so, and parents go, stop, and they go, it's okay, because I know what they're trying to do is to work out where they are and what the environment is. And you say, are you ready to come and lie down now? And all the time they're doing that, you're observing to see what their body is doing, what their posture is doing, what their eyes are doing, what their feet are doing, what their hands are doing. So you're gathering information all the time about what resources they have and what they don't and what they've missed. And that's just practice. Everyone can learn it. It just takes a bit of time. And you sit there going, all right. And you say, when you're ready, come and lie down here. And if they get on with the mother or the father, you say, can you lie down? Can you lie on this mat? Can you lie on mum? You've got to find the way in. So sometimes you say, oh, can you lie there? And you do the movement, start through the parent. And the child can just lie there. So you're not touching them. Right. Sometimes you take the parents and say, can you do this at home? Sometimes they've got a sibling with it, and you start with the sibling and you take it there, and it's not there. That's me. No, you give it to you can use sibling rivalry to your own advantage. Sometimes you've got to be a bit of a psychologist, and sometimes, and if you have to teach parents and things like that. But I always know that all they're really doing, these kids, is learning, how do I learn to be safe? And if I keep that in mind, then I can find the way in. And I attempt to teach people how to find the way in. I'm just more experienced than other people. I've done it a bit longer, but you can learn these things. And it could be play. And while I don't really like screens a great deal, and I certainly don't like them for young babies, if that's the only way in, to have them look at a screen, first of all, because that's how they're safe, then I might start there and then slowly start to take the screen away. So you ready to take it away now? Okay. And they might only take it away for 10 seconds and then have it up, but that 10 seconds has taught something. So I have to start with where they are. Remember, this is really important. If they're addicted to screens already, I have to acknowledge that's where they are. There's no point in taking it away. So that's how you can start to work with them. I'll start there. And then if they'll take it away for 5 seconds, look, there's a success. And that 5, they might become 6 or 7, because this is what I have to learn. This is how I've learned to be safe in the world. Because when I look at a screen, I'm locked down and I don't have to move. So the chaos within my body of I don't quite know how to organize anything gets locked out for you.
Yeah. So for therapists like myself, like occupational therapist and therapists who needs to work on functional and play-based, and like with RITP, we emphasize more of play and natural way to support reflex integration. How do you see rhythm, movement, and play working together?
If they're allowed to play, and they really watch them playing.
Okay.
Because play is something that's what kids do. It's their work.
Yeah,
The moment they see it at all, watching, it becomes different. But there's a rhythm that they get into, and they learn how to organize themselves, and they learn how to relate to themselves. And the kids who really don't have rhythm, who really don't have organization, they tend to be excluded from the group, or they go in and they hurt up unintentionally. They don't know how to relate. So learning about rhythm, learning about play, learning how. So sometimes our way in is through play, and it is to teach the body to play, because play is our learning. Yes. And we should play throughout our life. We sometimes forget, but play it's fun, but it's also safe.
Yes.
The people who talk about play, like Fred Donaldson or Stuart Brown or Peter Gray, there's this level of how play is teaching you how to be safe with other people, how to be in the world and to know what's happening around us. So that's why play is so important. But it's when when it stops being fun, and when it stops being a game, when it becomes competitive, when it does that, you're actually losing connection. So play is about teaching you connection. And when you see play in a competitive sport, it's not play. It really isn't play. And so you lose connection because
Yeah.
it becomes a very me thing, and and we forget that balance between the two, the me and the we, that we have to develop in the world in order to be able to live. So rhythm, when you have rhythm and smoothness and organization, you know how to be with other people and you can play. So when you go to a play-based therapy, or you use the movements from your book in this play way, when it stops being easy and it stops being a connection to it, that's when you have to pause those movements to allow us to get back into a place of, it's safe for me to move on here, I can do this.
Yeah.
So
And there's
play
that.
is a way of taking, of looking and seeing what's happening in the system.
Yes. And that takes skill for the therapist. Because it's like
Yes, but practice.
yeah, it is.
You
Yeah,
have to
it is.
start somewhere.
Yeah, it's definitely because it is being able to, it's like a dance, right? You're going with your client and then like when to stop, when to lead, when to see if they really are
So
from.
when you lose rhythm, when you lose organization, is
Mhm.
it time to pause? And I say it's a pause. It's not a stop, and you don't. It's this. The pause might be a week, but it's a pause, and you then come back, and the system has learned to integrate something at a different level, and I can come in. I've got more resources now to come on. So it's a maturity thing. It's a neural maturity. It's creating all of these activities. If they're done with intention, is about creating more neural connections, more neural maturity, strengthening the connections that we have, allowing other ones to disconnect the ones that are not working so well in there. And what is it? Robert Melillo talks about that neural immaturity of the system. And rhythmic movement at its very core is about developing neural maturity, because that's what reflexes are doing at the foundation, is creating the foundations for neural maturity. And one of the things is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's neural maturity is a journey, as we keep being told, men at 30 or women at 25 or something. I'm still waiting for mine. This is what it is. So it can, if I have a neural pattern that's very inefficient, is it possible? And I believe it's possible to come in and create a new pattern, and to create one that functions far more efficiently for it.
Yeah. What is, from your experience, what do you feel like the one misconception of reflex integration then or even now?
Conception about reflexes is that it's a quick fix
Yes.
program, and it's not a quick fix. I'd love to say it's a quick fix, come for 5 sessions and everything's fixed. It's just not. If you think about development and neurodevelopment, that's starting very early in utero, and the reflex programs and the number of reflexes that come in, but it's way over a year if it was working absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
You've got more than a year in place, 18 months or whatever it is. And so for the primitive reflex, you've got the intrauterine ones, what has to happen before birth. You've got what's available at birth, what has to develop after birth, what has to transition. So this takes time, and people are looking for this quick fix program.
Yeah.
See them 5 times and that's it. No, you have to do things at home. We ask people to perhaps have 5 minutes a day at home. If you don't have 5 minutes a day to spend with your child, save your money.
Good point.
You need to have consistency. Like babies need consistency. We have to learn when we're working with this area. If you look at babies, they pause all the time.
Yeah.
And we have to learn that the kids we work with, or the adults, they need pauses. They do something, oh, that's new. And we need to do that along the way. And so can I have that or not? And so I think the biggest misconception is that people think that it's a quick fix program. And no matter whose it is, whether it's MNRI, whether it's INPP, whether it's Melillo, whether it's RMTI, whether it's Annette Burnell, whether it's Feldenkrais movements, whether it's REI, whether it's RIE, whether it's whatever they are. And there's so many of them now, people tell me about them. I go, oh, okay, good. Does it work? Okay, fine. Could be flavor of the month. However, at the very foundation, it is, can you do what can and if I say to people when I take your class, you have the biggest tools you have are your hands. It's not something where you can sit back and say, no, I'd like you to do this, because that doesn't work. I have to teach the body in there. And can you find the place where the body is successful, where the body successfully knows how to move and it has rhythm and organization? There is always a place, and finding that place and moving on from it.
Yeah, I like that.
How do you get kids to feel safe, or adults to feel safe in the world, so they don't withdraw, so they don't attack out, so they don't go running and saying, save me, because this is what you have in the world.
I like to talk about inside our RITP, like the most functional efficiency, movement efficiency. Is the body efficient? Is it independent or moving in a way that is not taking too much energy? Or is it compensation? It's similar to that what you're saying. And I definitely agree with that.
But it is that when we're born, the part of the brain that's controlling movement is in the brainstem. And that's a very inefficient way of moving. But that's where the reflexes, the primitive reflexes are. When can we develop this maturity so I can begin to come from these higher levels of the brain and put those patterns in place and strengthen those so that the hindbrain can carry out what the higher levels of the brain want us to do. Because when I'm born, it's the hindbrain that's running things. And these people who still have reflexes active, in part what's happening is that the hindbrain, the parts of the medulla and things are still attempting to run the movement program, and that's very inefficient. And so can we start to let go of that? And if I go under, and I know for myself, if I go under stress, I will. So you say, no, in fact, I'll do.
Just freeze.
You freeze down and you lock down. Yeah. I fully admit to having a slight bit of immaturity myself.
I think everybody does.
Yes, but some people don't like to admit it.
No, the easier, you work on yourself.
To pretend that you're all perfect.
Yeah. So that's great. So what advice would you give therapists working in schools? Like I want to take it like in order. I want to hear your advice for in school setting. I want to hear your advice in clinic, and then I want to hear your advice at home. You
have a very different system in the US than other countries have, and that is that you have school-based therapists that many countries don't have. They usually kids are sent outside with other countries. But in the US, my understanding is that if you're a teacher in a classroom, especially early years, preschool, kindergarten, nursery, grade 1, 2, is to learn these patterns in the body about what the body is teach you about the kids. So the kids will have to sit there like that, sit like that. The one run around the room because they can't sit still. The kids who, when there's too many things in the room, are completely overwhelmed. And so go and learn what these patterns are. The kids who toe walk, the kids who have to keep talking, and all of these things. So go and learn those things. And if you're a teacher in a classroom, learn some movements that can help to calm kids down, whether it's a brain chem program, whether it's rhythmic some of the rhythmic movements that can be done in a classroom on the floor. Learn those as a group. But if you see kids who are really struggling and you've got the therapists at the school, like a PT or an OT, and they've learned reflex programs and say, do you know anything about reflex? Because they need this, because it's not just sensory, because sensory and reflexes have to learn to work together. So if you only focus on senses without having the movement, understanding part of it, you're in a little bit of trouble, I suspect. And then you go and say, if you're at a school and you can see those kids for 10 minutes a day and you can implement a program, like I'm going to say rhythmic movement because I know how it comes down, or either the pre-birth movements, and putting a program together, because often at home it doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do 10 minutes a day with these kids to allow their system to learn to calm down, because you need that bit of consistency in there. So you need to know that the people who are working individually with kids in school know about reflexes. That's what I think.
Yes,
Whether they
I
understand
agree.
them completely or
Yeah.
not, and they have to learn it, and they have to learn how reflexes and senses work together in there. That's what I think. So if you're in a school setting and you can get somebody to put a little program of 5-10 minutes
Yeah.
and in a classroom, you can do the growth. You can see the big picture in the classroom. The kids who've got some resources to work with, those who can't, but you can also do a little 10 minutes of very intentional movement here and intentional movement there. But
Yeah, I found that working, I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and after working in a school with teachers, what we ended up doing, we'll show you later, is a school program we created. And then just like you said, we created a curriculum-based movement activities the teachers can do with the whole class. Having them doing that is most effective. It can be brain gym exercises that they're doing as well, or reflex integration based. Just picking movements that is purposeful instead of just going to YouTube and just playing random music and dance.
That's right.
That's
So,
my.
we've got reading coming up. Let's get the eyes ready and let's get the ears ready. We've got, and there's lots of little movements. Brain is good for this, excellent for it, because they've got little things. In fact, I created cards for breaking with all of them. But
what would you recommend? A lot of parents are overwhelmed, obviously, and that sometimes it's really hard to have kids to carry over. Even for me, as being a trained therapist, and I've done MRI, done all that, and hours of work. I had my table at home, but the minute it came to like working with my own kids, that's why I ended up reading the books, because I was like, this is not easy. I need something 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
But one of the things about rhythmic movement that we've noted is that the kids like these, let's say 90% of kids really like these movements, and they will actually ask for them. So that there's something about the movement that calms them down and gets them, and they will actually ask for them. So and because we're only asking for 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes twice a day, and kids will ask for it, and you might get more than 5 minutes. And so the thing about it is, when it becomes, we've got to do our program now, and we must do it now, and and it's not fun, and it's not a game, and I don't want to participate, and they say, no, I don't want to do it. There's a reason why they don't want to do it, and you have to say, all right, so why is it? And so when it becomes a fight, you don't get anything. And the thing about this movement, it can be done while they're asleep.
Yeah, I like that.
A little bit. Let's do a minute here or a minute there. But you have to be willing. But I understand parents are in overwhelm and they don't know. And so part of the job of the therapist is to get the parents to understand why it's important, and the kids. And I always say, kids, this is what you're going to do at home. Remember this one. It's written down and your mum's done it and things like that. Oh, can you do it 6 days a week? You're allowed 1 day off for good behavior. But you don't have to. You can do it again. You can say, can I have a little bit? But kids, we've found, as a general rule, kids actually like these movements. So it's actually, and because it's not done for very long, they will actually buy in. And many times they'll say to parents, because we get feedback saying, can you please do these with me? And I don't have to, please, can you do it with me? And then you say, let's see if you can do it yourself. So and one of the things about rhythmic movement that other programs perhaps don't have is this passive component. So a lot of developmental movement before birth in particular, and after birth for a short period of time, is actually done passively. And so one of the things that is missed out in the world in a lot is this passive component of movement. That's being done. And so for some of these kids, when you start doing it, it's like you can see them go, oh, I'm finally getting something that I really needed. Because after birth, they need to be carried and rocked and hugged. And some babies aren't. They're in that equipment, and let's keep them there, and let's do that. Let's put them in that baby carrier thing. And they spend hours and hours in it. And before birth, the mother may have had extended periods of bed rest without movement. So the movement of the mother before birth is really important. So I think that for rhythmic movement, I think what happens is for many people, it's like they get this passive movement done, and it's like there's something that says, I'm finally getting something that I needed on this very deep developmental level that was perhaps missed out on. And I think that's why at one level we're quite successful at being done at home. And it's not an hour or 2 hours, and it's not painful, and it's not. And if it is, because tell people the moment there's any pain, you have to pause.
Yeah.
Because
Would you agree? Again, I only took in one of your online course, and just to familiar with myself with your method. For us, RITP is more of like movement, intentional movement, and play, and it's big movements as well, and active movement, not just passive. When I think about when we get cases, cerebral palsy, wheelchair bound, and can't move and cannot do most of the activity for exercises, for instance, that I have in my books. And then I recommend usually, I'm familiar with MNRI, hands-on passive movement. And sometimes RMTI is one method and rhythmic movement they can do because they're on the floor. I do believe in going through the natural progression as well. But did you find more success with clients who are wheelchair bound or severely
right, so
can't move?
the person who originated the movements was a woman called Kirsten Lind in Sweden. And she started back in the 70s with children with cerebral palsy.
Okay, it makes sense. Now
So this is where it started.
no wonder my energy was going there.
For those kids. And so that's what she
Yes.
started. I never met her, but so it started as this.
I see.
Why is it what's the difference between these kids who don't seem to have any difficulties and these kids who do with movement? So what is it? And so she started to work out this concept of rhythm and this concept of getting the body to understand and how it gets stuck and then of course Harold Blomberg took it in with his psychiatric patients and I had quite good success with these people who were in emotional overwhelm all the time, schizophrenia, psychosis in particular, and these kids, and then the kids we work with ADD and ADHD, it's this calming of the system so that I'm not in overwhelm all the time. So then the body is, even though they've got cerebral palsy or they're wheelchair bound, there's still a place in their body where they have some level of organization, and finding that and working from there into, well, of course, the earlier you are, the younger you are, the easier it is.
Yeah.
And babies may be talking back to you, but they don't. You sort of say, yes, I agree with you. Okay, whatever.
So it makes sense because I usually try to understand the origin story of any program, because whoever is the main client they're trying to work with is the program is tied to it. It makes sense that the rhythmic movement came from working with cerebral palsy clients, and that totally makes sense. How do you see the field of reflex integration in the next, now that more and more people are learning about it and it's growing, where do you see our reflex integration evolving to maybe 5 to 10 years?
Oh. Well, what I hope is that people go to people who've been perhaps programs for a fair time. There's a lot of new programs around.
Yeah.
And I don't, I won't be tired, but people, it's like anything, people jump on a bandwagon sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, don't be afraid for parents to ask questions about the background of that person. What training? Have they only done one training? Oh, I heard about it and I created
it.
And there's a few people around who said, I read this book and I made a course.
Yes.
Because it's a very hands-on process that we have to understand, whether it's MNRI, whether it's Melillo. There's a hands-on component of his, as well as he's got the computer programs and things like that, which I personally don't understand, but other people do, and that's fun. But whether it's that IMPP, that are all like a movement-based component to it. And so I really hope that people look and say, did this person just read a book and put a course together? And sometimes sadly, that's what's happening. But and it's like anything. And so I know that 30 years ago, Peter Blythe and Sally Goddard were considered to be total cranks in the area. And people who said that movement was important for brain development were considered cranks. Educate and brain chem were considered to be complete. What's wrong with you people? This has got nothing to do with it. And now it's coming out, the science is coming out that says this is really important, and movement is really important, and directed movement and what babies do is important. So the cranks and crackpots perhaps stop me, perhaps not so much. But I think it's a really good sign that the people who've worked with sensory integration and things for a long time and are starting to understand the importance of reflexes with that sensory work, that underlying this sensory stuff is this impact of how do we get there? If we didn't have movement, if why do we have movement? There's a program in the brain. Why is it important? And what is it about movement that's important for that? I like that it's not in universities. I rue the day that it becomes academic because it'll take the movement part out of it. And if people go, it needs to be movement-based, whether it's people I know like Sonia Story who do online stuff and then say, go and find someone like Rhythmic Movement to go and do more if you want to do that. There's people around, but at some level or other, you have to go to somebody who looks at this foundational aspect of movement, not just senses. And where it's going to be in 10 years' time, I don't know.
Well, I think my hope is that more and more, at least for OTs, that more and more OTs learn from it. Sensory integration made sense to me when I understood reflex integration. It finally clicked because when I first learned about sensory integration, it's just, I can't visualize it. It didn't click in my head. I don't know how else to explain it. I learned reflex integration was through one of MNRI first class, her first course that I took, and I just fell in love with it. It made sense. There's a sensory trigger, there's a motor response, and now it just all made sense. And I'm hoping for at least for OTs that they learn more and they understand the anatomy piece of it, functional movement pattern, functional skill, what the skill is and what part of the body is required to move and how these reflex patterns come together. So that is my hope for all the OTs who are listening.
And I guess I have that education background, so I'm hoping that teachers, I'd love for teacher training courses to include something about neurodevelopment and movement development and reflexes and what happens and how you can identify kids who don't have those foundations in place, because that then stops this, you're just naughty, you're bad, go sit down in the corner, because teachers don't know. And they, and when they find out, they go, oh, and then they say, oh, this kid. And so it takes the guilt away. It takes the kid being away that's wrong, that there's something wrong with them. There's not something wrong with them. What they have is an immaturity in the system. And if we can get that, and then even if they don't feel they've got the skills to deal with it, they can know who to send it to. And in the US, you've got people in schools, and I hope everyone who works in a school, whether it's as a PT, and more PTs are learning about reflexes too, which is
we have PTs too.
More OT that I know that within the alternative kinesiology field, because where I know there's more people learning about that and putting the information in because it is so foundational.
Vision therapists just finding, and
so it doesn't mean to say that eventually they don't find something that's even under reflexes. It could be very well, because there's that little 5-week period in there before the reflexes start emerging through there. That doesn't mean I don't think that, but at the moment we have to learn this. And if the medical field can understand that too, if pediatricians can understand. If I've heard pediatricians say that crawling is not important.
Well,
it's true. You do get up and walk, but if we live in a world where academic skills are considered to be an incredibly important part of who we are, crawling's important for that. Pediatricians, maternal health nurses, I don't know what they're called in the US, the New Zealand, they're called plunket nurses, and they're there's maternal health nurses and systems around the world. If they know that and they can identify perhaps with very young babies who don't have these things in place that they're meant to have in place, and what can be done about it.
What would you say? A few more questions. What would you say to another misconception? Now people are connecting a diagnosis with reflex. I try to say no.
I tend to do a behavior or something that's not functioning with reflex, but it's just never one reflex. And this is what people say, oh, I'm working with everyone works with the Moira. Well, maybe
Yeah.
the thing is, it's not just one, it's all tied together. And the thing about it is that, for instance, I start here, and then I move here, and then I move here, and then I move here. The thing is that each person we work with, their combination of how things haven't clicked together or have clicked together is individual to them. And that's why you have to work out, where am I and what do I have to work on here? Maybe it is fear paralysis, but they're not safe around me, so I'm not going to start there. But can I get the body to understand, and then the brain starts to say, okay, it's not so bad out here. Let me work at an intentional level here. There's many groups I read these things and I go, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going down the rabbit warren. But we have to understand that it's not a rigid program. If no one had any emerged reflexes, they wouldn't be here.
Yes.
That at some level, I've got enough resources to function somehow in the world. And our job is to find out what they have and to build on that.
Okay. Yes.
Not what they don't have, it's what they have.
That's good. That's good. Thank you so much. And before, I know I kept you like about an hour. Thank you so much. I was saying like 30 minutes or so. If you could give one advice for, I know it's hard. I know it's hard for new OTs or new therapists coming into the program, or just even a seasoned therapist, to be open-minded and to learn. What would, as a therapist, like you've been doing this for several years and you still have passion for it, and you're very open and you sharing like willingly with your knowledge. So what would you give specialists? What would be like the one advice that you give them?
Never pretend you know everything.
I love it. I love it.
That it's an exploration, that you work with people as an exploration, and be curious.
Yes.
But be safe. And the reason when we go into being a bit dogmatic about things is because we don't feel safe, and we don't feel that we know everything. And I certainly don't know everything.
Yeah.
But play.
I love it. Play. Yeah. And for me, the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know enough.
Oh, yeah. I'm well in that one.
I was like, no, I just
don't know. Let me see. I have a saying, if in doubt, make it up.
And the session
works anyway, as long as you go with that intention of, let me see what's happening here.
Test it out. Yeah. Explorer, investigator.
Yeah.
And then where can people learn more about your work? You said just a little bit ago that you have a second book, right? So you just showed me. Maybe you can show us.
Beyond the C-Squirt, A Journey with Reflexes.
When did you release that?
A few years ago, 2019, I believe.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. Yes, it's available in English, Spanish, French, Italian, Chinese, nearly Arabic, and nearly Bulgarian.
That's good to know. Okay, we're gonna put that below in our description.
It's on Amazon.
Okay, we'll just put the title for people to find.
It's a different. It has stories and things in there, so it's easy read. It's not very technical at all.
Good.
It's easy to read.
So for parents and educators and therapists.
Yeah, it's easy. There's little charts in the back about some of the reflexes that are involved with conditions, like if you're clumsy or you have concentration problems, some of the reflexes that are involved as a combination and things. So there's all sorts of things in the back. But it's stories. I like stories. Stories are fun.
I love books, so I'm going to have to get one of those. Thank you so much. Anything that you think I should have asked? Something you want to share? Any thought? that comes to mind?
No.
Okay, great.
No.
So that means I got most of
I didn't know
it.
what I was going to do. Is I just blab. I mean,
And this was really helpful. And thank you so much for joining me.